Greetings, amigops and top teners everywhere. This is Mike from Top 10 with Kyle and Mike. I am joined this week, as I am every week, by our lovely, our bearded, our handsome co-host Kyle. Now this week we'll be talking about a topic which both of us know. This is one of those very special weeks where we both know the topic ahead of time. Importantly, Kyle will be the guiding force behind this week's topic, which I know many of you fans out there like. So we're going to talk about this topic. We're going to debate it vigorously. By the end of the episode, we will have a definitive top 10. So Kyle, why don't you tell the listeners what we're talking about this evening?
All right, Mike, as you know, as our listenership know, as the country knows, we are hot on the heels of the release of Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Warner Brothers. I mean, The Crimes of Grindelwald. I'm sorry.
Come on.
I'm sorry.
I want to note for the listeners, so the entirety of our interactions thus far, which is a rarity on this pod about this topic, is I texted Kyle and said, "Hello, Kyle, I have seen the film. Have you seen the film?" He says, "Michael, I have not seen the film. What are your thoughts?" I say, "I don't want to spoil it. My thoughts are positive." End of communication on this topic for like a week. Kyle texts me back, says, "I have seen the film. I did not care for the film. Let's discuss." So this is where we're at. Now, I also want to double back on something I just said. Let me be very clear. We don't discuss these ahead of time, but typically the conversations that we have are things that have been simmering in sort of the back of our ongoing friend discussion for years. This is a really virgin territory here. We have not talked about this.
This is going to be fresh. So
yeah,
but we also we know enough that we kind of are coming at this from two different perspectives, and
yes.
And for that,
fire and ice.
Yeah, I'm John, but the.
I'm Danny.
Should we?
Ugh.
Or should... No, never mind. But...
No, probably not.
No. But as a result, we couldn't do, like, the best things about Crimes of Grindelwald.
Yes, that's a really good thing to point out. We couldn't... Kyle was like, alright, so let's do the top 10 worst things about it. I was like, no, let's do the top 10 best things about it. So, we've come to a slightly different arrangement.
What we believe I think is going to be an effective compromise is we're just going to be talking about all of the unanswered questions that The Crimes of Grindelwald leaves us with at movie 2 in this series. So
yeah, of 5.
Of 5. So
for now.
It's probably going to be 7 or 8.
Yeah. So
that's what we're going to do. We're just going to talk about things that are left unanswered, or I've included in here just some questions. They don't have to be like plot related necessarily, just some questions I have.
Yes. So there's a good segment on a podcast that you and I both adore, which is the Rewatchables, that they do unanswerable questions. And I kind of assumed that at least some portion of this evening's proceedings would be reminiscent of the unanswerable questions, because there were a few.
Half of this podcast is going to be me poking holes in this movie in question format, and the other half is going to be exploring some of the great things about this movie and talking about where this franchise might be going. I think it'll be an effective mix of both, and we'll naturally get to talk about the things we did and didn't like, and have kind of a little bit of a debate over it, so.
Yeah. So I think, I just wanted to say 2 more things before we dive in. One is, I think we probably all know what number 1 is going to be, or at least I feel pretty confident what number 1 is going to be, so we'll kind of burst the bubble of that now and say, yes, what you think is number 1 is probably. Kyle, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay, so we all who have seen the movie, so big spoiler alert.
Yeah.
This huge spoiler alert, flashing red spoiler alert if you haven't seen this movie. What you think is number 1 is going to be number 1. But the other thing is, I just want to get a quick, did you like this movie? Just real quick. We'll get into the details. Give me like your score, A to F.
A to F?
Yeah.
This movie...
With pluses and minuses.
This movie, for me, was probably a D.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
We'll get into it.
A D.
It's not an F. It didn't fail at what it set out to do.
What is the highest? Okay, so let me ask. What is the highest this can be if movie 3 does some stuff?
No. Okay, we're already getting into it. Don't even come at me with this stuff. Why are we talking about Fantastic Beasts 3? Like, This movie should be able to exist in a vacuum. Like, I hate this argument. People say this about, The Force Awakens. Well, it's a lot better if you watch it in context. But listen, that might be true, but a movie as a unit, I should be able to watch a movie and start to finish just be entertained. And
now, I utterly agree, and I think that imposes a certain ceiling on this movie. But the question remains. I hear you, your soapbox. I've noted your big picture argument. But do you think that this can slide up if some of these unanswerable or unanswered questions are answered to your satisfaction in the next movie?
I really don't think so. I think...
Okay. It will always feel like a missed opportunity for you.
I think that will make the next movie really good. I think it might affect how I view the series as a whole when we're done with this whole thing. But as far as this movie goes, I don't really think there's a ton of room for redemption here.
Okay.
But I don't know. Who knows?
Okay. That's fair. I'll give you mine. B. I give it a B.
Okay.
I thought there were some really high highs. There were some really interesting lows, but I think some really high highs.
Okay. All right. We'll talk about
Let's get rolling.
Number 10. This is a carryover from the first movie that didn't get answered in this. I'm sure it will be at some point. In the first movie, we hear tell that Newt was expelled from Hogwarts. Having to do something with a beast. But we don't know what, and we still don't know what. This movie did not answer that question for us. There'll be more Newt backstory, I think, going forward. And I'm looking forward to that.
So do you think that they've hinted enough that they have to tell us?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And you think this will be a Dumbledore-related reveal? Like, it'll be really tied up in Dumbledore, and we'll figure out why he believes in Newt so deeply?
So my suspicion, and we're venturing into the land of, what does Dumbledore say? We are now venturing into the realm of guesswork, or whatever. So Newt is a wizard who owns a wand and practices magic at a high level.
Yes.
Which he should not have been able to do if he was expelled from Hogwarts, a la our friend Hagrid. Yes. Who had his wand snapped over someone's knee. So, somewhere in here, there's a story of why Newt was expelled, why he got his wand back. I'm sure Dumbledore's involved in that process. Mm-hmm. And I think that'll probably have something to do with why they seem to have such a tight bond.
But I want to introduce a sort of a question I'm probably going to be asking you a lot here, which is, for this one, what % possibility do you put on that this is just a plot mistake? Like him having a wand and doing magic. Because that was a question that I found myself asking a lot in this movie.
Yes.
Which was not so much like, what the hell is the plan here? It was like, is there just not a plan? So for this one, what percentage possibility do you assign like that's just kind of a mistake?
10%.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
I think that they have a very and the fact that we're already seeing flashbacks of his time at Hogwarts leads me to believe that they're going to go into this in pretty great detail. And I think it'll probably involve Letta in some capacity.
Yeah. Yes. I'm sure we'll get to her more. Yeah, that's an unanswered question that I would like to have answered.
Yeah, that's one I'm interested to see it resolved. So number 9, towards the end of the movie, this is a little thing I really liked. So right before Letta jumps into Grindelwald's fire, or like basically sacrifices herself.
For some reason.
Yeah. She looks back at Newt and his brother, what's his face?
Yeah, Theseus,
and she says, "I love you." And I love the way it's shot because Theseus is in front of Newt. It's not entirely clear that he knows that Newt's behind him, but Newt's looking over his shoulder right at her. And my question, and I'm glad that it's a question, I don't really know, who is she talking to?
Kyle, here's the problem. The best thing about this unanswered question, as of right now, is that it's unanswered, which I believe is what you're getting at there. I feel confident, beyond confidence, that this question will be ground into the dust and answered so thoroughly and so literally that there will be no question by the end of this series. What possibility do you assign to that? That it's so obvious by the end of these movies. There's no question. There's some scene in a train station after everybody's dead.
0% chance this goes unanswered.
Yeah, I think so too.
Which is a bummer because, you know, it would be cool.
Yeah.
Is if she was actually...
question.
Yeah, what is it? This was it. And we just like, well, we don't know.
That's life.
No, he'll never know. He'll have to live with that for a while.
But ask any mystery writer who's ever tried to pull that move.
Yeah.
People really don't like that. Like, I believe you would. Yeah. Because I think you're a student of the form and you have a complex way of approaching these things. It would gnaw away at a lot of people and they get really mad if they never answer this.
Yeah. It's too bad. But in this moment, this unanswered question is one I'm glad was posed.
Yeah, it was a good moment.
On the opposite end of the spectrum of ones that I think it was probably just a mistake or just either poor or lazy writing. The Jacob Confundus charm thing. Did this bother you as much as it bothered me?
How casually we were performing the Confundus charm?
No, how casually we discarded like an entire universe's canon on how Confundus charms are performed and work. That like this particular Confundus charm just happened to only erase bad memories, and since his memories of the first movie's events were positive in general, so he didn't forget them. Like, where is there any precedent? Not only where is there precedent for it, but we have tons of precedent in 7 books that this is not how this works, right?
So, okay, maybe I need a memory jog. My recollection from the end of the first one is that there's that rain, right? It's Frank the Thunderbird.
Yeah.
Causes the rain, and that causes everybody to forget what the hell's going on.
All right, if I remember correctly...
No, I'm sure you do.
The source of the magic is still a Confundus charm. It's just that they need a Thunderbird to send, like, basically relay the power of the charm to a wide number of people.
I think you're right about that. So this is still work. So we're saying fundamentally this is still a Confundus charm.
Right. And so... Like, and if there were some other piece of lore about Thunderbirds that said they can cause storms that cause people to forget painful memories, we'd be having a different conversation. It seems like they're just like, well, you know, how do we get this Muggle guy back into the picture? And it felt really, really lazy, and it really took me out of it. I hated it.
So here's what I think is interesting about books versus movies. Ignoring the new movies for a second, if you take a look at the Harry Potter movies, so I've been rewatching the Harry Potter movies, the original 8, and what you find is on the page, the magic is often very subtle and complicated because the form allows for it. The movies, it is less so. So like memory modification, nonverbal spells, wandless magic, all these things that allow a spell to be partially done or kind of done or done incorrectly. Like Patronus charms, for example. I was just watching The Order of the Phoenix and being very annoyed to see all of these characters just shooting out these full corporeal Patronuses with no issue. The problem is the movie needs to kind of clean it up and make it easier because that's the only way to make it work. But at least with those ones, we have the books to go back on and say, this is just a movie trick. This one, and this is not my own point, this came up on Binge Mode, they were pointing out that at least with the first ones, there's a difference where you can still say, yeah, but we still have the books. Yeah. Whereas this, we don't still have the books on stuff like that. I think I would feel like this was necessary movie magic if I had read the book where this happened in a much subtler and better explained way. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. I agree with you. I think the reason it bothers me is because why not have, like, wouldn't it have been so easy to say, well, Queenie, having a little crush on this Muggle, cast a shield charm and confunded him kind of secretly to make him think that he'd forgotten this stuff and then just went back and undid it later. Like, why not do that? It just felt like very, very haphazard. And I didn't care for it. So, like, what's the question here? I don't know. Like, the unanswered question is, like,
why.
Is there a difference in that particular Confundus charm, or like is there something we're missing? Because that really stuck in my craw. And that happened really early on, and it put me in kind of a bad mood, I'll admit.
As a final added note on this topic, I want to remind you how weird and confused the application of the Imperius Curse and the Confundus Charm became by the end of the original 8 movies. Like, if you recall, when they go into Gringotts in 7 Part 1, and they perform the Imperius Curse, which in the books is this big moment where Harry is performing an unforgivable curse and is supposed to really mean something, and he feels that warmth flowing down his arm, and you get this whole description where he feels like he's controlling somebody and he doesn't like it. In the movie, instead, it's this goblin sniffs the air and like goes, ah.
Right.
And so I think the sense that they had to represent something in a movie that was tough to represent, already as viewers, our memory and our recollection of what these different charms do that are, like, at least theoretically in the same family, has become pretty confused. So I think as viewers, this only confuses it further.
Well, in the same movie, when Newt and Jacob go into that, like basically the French version of Diagon Alley, and they go through that statue, or maybe it's Tina, like she has to, that one of them confunds the guard, and he like is confused. Like it's just like it feels like they're mixing stuff up. I don't know.
It's kind of unclear what those different pieces of magic do.
So whatever.
Yeah, I'm with you. The magic matters.
Yeah. Yeah, that right? Like the fact that like we've just done 4 podcasts on this stuff, like we care about the details of this universe. Yeah. And so everyone does. Like people are really into it, and like, it feels that it just unsettled me that it didn't seem like they were paying as much attention to it as we were. But
well, I think you and I both fall into the same camp, which is that we are detail oriented, but we're not pricks. I don't think. Maybe we are. But I think that I think maybe even me more than you, I'm pretty fine with letting stuff like this roll, because I don't feel as attached to some of that. I'm pretty fine with screwing a couple things up here and there as long as you're getting the bigger picture right. Where I run into trouble with some of these things is when I feel like, and you said this perfectly before, it feels like I'm being taken out of the illusion. Like I feel as though I'm falling out of the moment, and that's not what I want.
Yeah, and I'm, like you just said, I'm super willing to suspend my disbelief. That's part of what makes the movies I love so much fun. And
suspend your suspension of disbelief. You're like, you're fine with accepting the rules of the game.
Right.
Yeah. Or accepting the suspension of the rules of the game as long as it serves something.
I would give this one a 100% chance of remaining unanswered. I think this is just something that slipped through the cracks.
Yeah.
Number 7 is one that I don't care even a little bit about, but is unanswered and makes me wonder about the nature of magic, so I thought I would bring it up. So, our friend Yusuf, the guy who's supposed to be killing Credence, or so he believes.
Yeah.
First of all,
I don't know.
Like,
I don't know what was happening here.
Why is this guy in this movie?
Yeah, I want to go off on the sidebar once you get your first thought out, because I have a related thought.
Moving past that, you could have removed this character entirely from this movie and it would have made it not an iota of difference, but whatever. My question is, and it's an interesting question, I guess. If Yusuf
I think I know what your question's going to be, and I like it.
So here's what I'm wondering. If you make an unbreakable vow to kill a man's most loved person and find out that the person you thought was that person is already dead, is he now obligated by this vow to kill a different person? Like, how is this unbreakable vow resolved?
Yeah. I'm so interested in that, and that is exactly what I thought you were going to say, and I hoped this would come up. I hope, beyond hope, and I believe, this one will remain unspoken, because I think that the genius of JK's magical system is that it doesn't over-explain. I think when she gets into problems is when she over-explains, and when she's at her best, it's when she kind of leaves things a little bit vague and a little bit messy, as we were saying earlier. And I think the world in which the unbreakable vow depends upon the meaning of the speaker and the context is a better world for us to live in. So I like the idea that it doesn't really pass on. It adapts to what they meant.
Right.
And since the thing that he meant is no longer possible, he's relieved. Is that, to me, feels the most consistent with the world that she's put together. That's my feeling, is that I think if I were to say how I think this magic works, I think intention matters, and I like to think that that's how it works here.
I would say the same thing. A tangential question I have is, let's say, why the sense of urgency? Because my question is, if you make an unbreakable vow to kill someone, when does it become apparent that you can't kill that person? Is he afraid that Credence is going to die in some other way, thus making it impossible for him to fulfill his vow? At which point does that then mean he broke the unbreakable vow and then he's dead? Right.
I find that magic really interesting, but I especially like it in its mystery.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm fine with this remaining nebulous, and maybe wizards don't even understand it.
Kind of case specific.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I think it's an interesting question that arises out of a situation that is, in my opinion, just terrible, terrible writing. And
yeah,
I don't know, maybe there's some long-term plan for him in this series, but he just doesn't, he's boring. He's only there, he's the plot character in Chris Nolan movies.
Exposition.
Oh my god. In any movie where you have to have a character stand there for probably 3 minutes of screen time and just say, but my father with his mistress and this and this and that. And then someone says, what about this? He's like, It was God, can we move this along?
So here's this is my tangential point that I think this is the right time to introduce it because of what you've just said. And I will be bringing this back up. My biggest unanswerable question for this whole movie is why JK as the writer thought that this was the best way to get these characters to do these things. Because I believed, and when I first watched this, there were so many individual moments that I liked that I wasn't struck by how problematic the way they're threaded together is. Now, having rewatched it, so I've seen it twice now, the initial joy of those great moments that I really liked, it just naturally kind of wears off a little bit. And so the cracks of why these things were put together the way they were showed a little bit more. And this whole Leda, Corvus, Yusuf thing, to me, was not the best way at all to get a couple of interesting characters to do interesting things. Because I actually, hot take here, I loved the scene on the boat, whatever boat this was. I thought that scene of watching that white cloth of that baby sink down was so effective. It was so interesting. And for me as a viewer, required literally nothing more. Because I could see that scenario, and I've heard people disagree, but a little girl switching out a baby because the baby's really annoying is a thing that could happen. It's a little bit kooky, but it's a thing that could happen without any magic, without any family history. And the girl then being haunted by that because it caused the death of the baby, haunting her for the rest of her life, that could happen and requires nothing more. So what we have here is a really interesting scenario that I thought was well done, which was then connected in numerous strange and unnecessary ways to a larger story. That to me is the Yusuf problem, which is that Yusuf was an interesting character. His mother's tale, it clearly was intending to bring in some tones of race and gender, and I think temporarily did so in an interesting way. Because for me as a viewer, it made me say, oh, this is interesting. We're looking at the relationship between a white man and a black woman at a time in culture and history when those relationships were especially fraught. I wonder what element in the magical world magic introduced into those relationships. Oh God, were wizards involved with these institutions? Blah, 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 blah. Interesting questions. Didn't need this story. could have been an interesting question that was posed without introducing all of this extra complexity that fucked up the plot.
I think that a lot of it was probably done in order to orchestrate a fulfilling kind of twist or revelation in that crypt scene. And I just don't think it paid off particularly well.
Because it didn't need to.
It had nothing to do with anything. Like, because you're exactly right. Like, you could have the same kind of reveal just by showing a girl switching a baby. I don't know. I just thought that in a movie with as many moving parts, and I applaud the ambition of having as many moving parts as it did, but I just think they went a little too far, and as a result, some of the parts end up feeling tacked on, and that's that character for me.
And especially where you stake a lot of the movie's emotional weight on those couple things that I never was going to care as much about. Yeah. I will come right back to the lead-up question. I think it would have been, and I get it, this isn't what they were trying to do, but Newt is clearly, or was clearly, in love with this girl. His brother is now engaged to her. Big part of his life. He's clearly a guy who doesn't interact well with other people. If he finds out that this girl, who clearly has had a very difficult life, who's a sad, quiet, withdrawn person, who clearly grew up in difficult circumstances, who felt like an outsider at Hogwarts, he finds out that this happens, that is the climax of a really good movie.
Yeah.
Like a really good movie.
Yeah,
and that's, to me, that's my broader complaint about this series is, what could be more interesting if you wanted to make this the Dumbledore show, which is acceptable? What could be more interesting than a boy being in love with another boy and having this boyfriend, whatever they ended up being, we still don't really know, turn out to be one of the most evil people who's ever been? I don't know. That's interesting enough for me. Man, that's interesting enough. I don't need all this other stuff.
I agree. I think just a general bigger problem of this movie is that they're trying to keep their feet squarely in both of these worlds. They didn't full send on the Dumbledore stuff, and we'll get to more of this, but yeah, like there's enough here. Like we don't need this, I think is what you're getting at, and I agree with that. Let's get into our not top
big
three.
tangent, sorry, but it's just,
no, it's very important.
Yusuf is such a good encapsulation.
No, it's basically the crux of the movie's problems. Like it's worth spending time on that because I think that's a big part of it for me. For the not top three, I did 3 questions that this movie answered.
What is the title?
So that's one of them. One of them is, after the first movie, we joked about it on one of our pods. We were like, who the fuck are these characters? Like, what are their fucking names? And
I do know their names now.
This movie was they must have read How to Win Friends and Influence People, because every time anyone addressed anybody, it was by first name. Like, Tina, Queenie.
Yeah.
Like,
I forgot all of their names.
I believe very, very much that this was extremely intentional in order to get people to remember their names a little bit better this time around. And it was effective. I remember their names.
I do too. So
number 1 question answered. What are the characters' names? We know. Number 2.
That's my favorite.
Yeah. Number 2 is, we've heard of the famous Grindelwald prison escape in the books a number of times. How did he do it? We saw it. It was awesome. I was so amped for this movie after the first 10 minutes.
Yeah. I had some logistical issues overall with that initial escape. I also found it really interesting that he has a chupacabra named Antonio, but I was all in on this. I totally agree. This to me was really creative, interesting use of magic, because people aren't just going to Avada Kedavra the shit out of each other. Sometimes they are going to dip a fast-moving, thestral-drawn carriage into the water and drown some bitches.
I thought it was worthy of a good prison escape scene, and I liked the depiction of magic involved, and I like that piece of Grindelwald's backstory filled in for me. That was great.
Yep. Totally agreed.
Third one was something I thought we might see based on the trailer, but I was excited, was what does Dumbledore see in the mirror of Erised? Because in the books Harry asks him, he says, I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks.
Yeah.
And then I love the way she writes this. It's something about like Harry's on his way back to his dormitory and he considers, Dumbledore may not have been entirely truthful with me. And then he thinks, but then again, it was a very personal question. Which it is. It's literally a person's, their heart's desire. It's the most personal question. And it was cool. And I think you probably could have predicted this, that he would see Grindelwald in the mirror opposite him. But that was, to me, that was one of the more effective scenes in the movie. I thought it was really cool.
So I actually think it's even, so I think you're totally right, but I think it's even more interesting because to me, it begs the question, why is he not seeing Ariana? Why is he not seeing his family all whole together? And I think there are several interpretations, and I've heard this debate brought up a little bit. My interpretation is that he is still kind of immature. Like, the Dumbledore we're seeing here has not clearly fully come to terms with his relationship with Grindelwald or his role in for the greater good stuff. He's not over that. He's not the fully fleshed out, fully adult Dumbledore who we see at 150 years old or whatever the hell he is later. So I like to think that at 40 or 45 or whatever he is here, he's seeing what is still kind of a childish dream. And in a few years after he's kind of processed what he's been through a little bit more, then he would no longer see Grindelwald and he would see his family whole together. That's my interpretation, but I like that this scene enhanced our thinking on Dumbledore from the binary. He was a boy who fell in love with this guy and then got in too deep, and then a fully grown old ass wizard who regretted it all and wished his family were back together. There is clearly a transition there that I like in this.
No, I agree. And I think what's bothering some people about this movie is that it's kind of shedding more light on the modeled parts of Dumbledore's past, which I happen to love. I think it's cool that we're seeing this transitional Dumbledore. And I also think the mirror probably shows different things in very short amounts of time. I think maybe in this point in his life, he's, who knows, maybe still a little envious of what Grindelwald's doing right now.
Exactly.
We don't know.
And that would fit really nicely, I think, with our broader understanding of Dumbledore. Like, Dumbledore A, Dumbledore B is not a realistic way of interpreting him, and I think we've never been led to that by the way JK has written it, but I think that's sort of the simplified version people have gone with, and I like that this is sticking with the more complicated version.
Agreed. Yeah. And also what I like about this version of Dumbledore is that he's kind of a dick, and Dumbledore in the books is still kind of a dick, but it comes out...
Always.
Yeah, but it comes out kind of in little spurts here and there. I think this Dumbledore, like, kind of knows it. He's, like, got a little swag about it, which I really like.
I mean, I know this is certainly not an original thought. This is the best Dumbledore who's been put on screen. This is Dumbledore. I actually think this is exactly what I picture Dumbledore being. Jude Law is pretty much pitch perfect. Everything he's done so far, every little character note has been exactly how I would picture my Dumbledore doing things. I love him.
I love Jude Law, and I'm very, very excited to see him flex a little more with this character that we're getting, like, I don't know, we're getting to know Dumbledore really, really well. I like it. So,
yeah.
Anyways.
Especially if he keeps wearing those dope-ass suits.
Ellie just pointed this out, that she was talking to someone or reading something about, like, wondering, like, when this transition occurred between three-piece suits and, like, this, like, purple spangly ass robe.
Yeah, he went from, like, Frank Sinatra to Elton John very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an unanswered question that I'd love to see answered as well in this series.
The fashion crimes of Dumbledore.
Yeah. What are you wearing? All right. Number 6. This is more of I guess, kind of a nitpick. Maybe. We'll debate. Number 6. How old is Minerva McGonagall?
This is a mistake.
It is a mistake, right?
This is a mistake. I saw somebody putting out the different theories, and once again, I love all of these charitable, interesting interpretations. This was J.K. Rowling wrote a script without this reference. Somebody said, hey, we should put McGonagall in. And then she goes, oh, okay, cool. And then they did it, and they didn't think any more of it. frankly, and I don't think you're going to bring this up later, so my much bigger issue is that this is the Professor McGonagall, I think, we think, who says, transfiguration is not a punishment, and then fixes that girl's mouth and then redoes it. It's so against everything she's ever been as a character, and I like, it played for a laugh in the theater, but that's not her at all.
No.
This was a huge strategic error.
Well, so I did a little looking into it just to see if it was possible to spin this. But, so, she's at Hogwarts, presumably teaching.
Yeah.
The youngest she could possibly be is 17, right? Assuming that they bend the rules and let her teach there after she's graduated. Sure. Fine.
Yeah.
The year we know in this...
She's a genius.
Yeah. We happen to know in this flashback, because the movie takes place in 1927, the flashback is 10 years prior, we know this is 1917, which would put McG at her birthday being in 1900. And now we also know that Harry Potter, the first 7 books, take place between 1991 and 1998, putting McGonagall at a keen 98 years old in Deathly Hallows.
But we also know she said in, I think, Order of the Phoenix, she's in her 60s. She said it. She said it to Umbridge. Yeah, Umbridge says something about, like, I can fire your ass or whatever, and she says, I am a woman in my 60s. Like, I forget exactly how it comes up. It might not be that. I may have made that up. But there's an interaction she has.
Or maybe she says how long she's been teaching or something that would...
She makes enough of a reference that this actually, you're being too generous. It's not possible. She'd have to be negative years old. So it is not possible.
Oh, okay, cool. The only reason I was going to be very generous in my assessment was that in Deathly Hallows, it's not clear if this is factual or not, but Auntie Muriel says, give me that chair, I'm 107 years old. Which begs the question, like, what's the life expectancy for a wizard?
It's longer. They make a joke, too, about Dumbledore. What's Dumbledore? He's about 140. Looks good for 140. Like, there's a movie scene where they do that, and I don't know if that's explicitly in the books. I seem to recall it's not, but I think it's kind of generally accepted that they live, call it, time and a half.
Okay. So, is it entirely unreasonable that she could be around 100 in Deathly Hallows? No, if it weren't...
That part, no, if she hadn't specifically said. That's the problem. That's where we run into the issues. They said it. That's an unforced error.
I don't like it.
I believe the kids call it.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough look.
Yeah, tough look for our guy Jameson.
That's right. Number 5 is a question I really like, that was presented to me by Dylan, and I have to not confess, but it had not occurred to me even for a second while watching the movie, and he was, like, so sure that this is what happened, I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Mm-hmm. It was really interesting. So, as soon as we walked out of the theater, Dylan said, I don't remember what he said exactly, but basically the effect was, wow, that's crazy, Queenie must have been imperious.
Yeah.
To me, I thought, it never even occurred to me that had been the case. And I much prefer this story arc if she wasn't. And I think it would kind of be bailing on one of the only parts of this movie that I really loved if she were to have been imperious. But I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
So I've heard some interesting stuff about this. I've heard the very elaborate theories. I'll give you my own. My interpretation is very simple and somewhat cynical, but just simple. So J.K. Rowling is very political and has become more political in recent years. And as you and I and we all know, the world has changed a lot in the last couple of years. There have been a lot of extremist parties that have risen throughout the world, and particularly in Europe, which importantly is where J.K. Rowling lives. So extremist parties have risen, and there's been a lot of people who kind of look like men and women on the street who have joined these extremist parties. And I think J.K. Rowling is attempting to take one of our characters who she built up a lot of trust and love with for us as viewers and say, look, see, the person that you go to church, school, work with could support one of these extremist parties. It's important that we be vigilant. So that's all I think this was. I don't think that there's a big elaborate imperious thing. I think J.K. Rowling kind of pigeonholed this. I want to show how a regular person gets caught up in this thing. I think that's what she was doing. That said, I don't think it totally flopped. I, like you, actually liked this, but I think that was the motivation.
Yeah, to me, this is probably my favorite part of the whole movie. I thought it was really cool that when presented with this argument in a certain way to emphasize how it could benefit her and do away with something she doesn't care about and frame it in a message that she could understand, that a person could be convinced to do something like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It reminded me of, like you were saying, some of the kind of political movements that have happened in Europe in the past, and how a message, when spun a certain way, can appeal to certain senses. And to me, like, it didn't seem that unreasonable. Like, she loves this guy, and she's being told in her society that not only can she not marry this guy, she can't even interact with him. Like,
yeah,
of course she would be tempted to follow a person that is telling her that's wrong. And in a way, like, obviously the methodology that they're going to go through to achieve those ends is wrong, but the sentiment is not. And Grindelwald doesn't believe that she should be able to marry a Muggle, probably. But that's not how he frames it to her. And sorry, continue. Well, I'll wrap it up. To me, like, this is one of my absolute favorite parts of the movie, because it made a ton of sense to me. Like, I really understood her anger and fear, and that was like the only part of the movie really where I was like emotionally connected to something a character was going through. I loved it, and I hope that she wasn't Imperious for that reason.
I totally agree. I hope she wasn't Imperious. I think it really worked. I think that argument appealed very nicely to her, and I think it does speak to the personal motivations that lead people to kind of forego the feelings of others as their personal considerations. I also think that this scene I think the movie would not have held together even as well as it did if this speech were not so effective, but man, it was. I think that Johnny Depp killed this scene. It worked so well because this speech was persuasive. That vision of people marching alongside that train and then the atomic bomb exploding, that was my favorite part of the movie. It put in pretty stark relief the stakes, and I thought it made a lot of sense as an argument. As an argument, we are the beings who could prevent something like this from happening. And so this is where I cross into a little bit of an issue with the movie portrayal of Grindelwald, though, and you said it, I don't think he believes that a Muggle and a wizard or witch should be able to have a relationship. And you're right, based on the movie, but my issue is I think that the book version might be okay with that, and might even support that, because the book version, at least as far as we know, we don't get all the information, I think he really did believe in for the greater good. And that to me was the differentiation between Grindelwald and Voldemort. Voldemort is just a power-hungry asshole. That's kind of all he is he wants power, and he wants power for power's sake. I think Grindelwald really is a misguided idealist in the books, whereas in this, they're kind of turning him into a little bit more of a blood purity maniac, which I don't think is his thing so much. So I thought that this scene hung together best when I believed that he really he bought these lines of argumentation that he was throwing out there. Clearly he was using them to manipulate people, but I think that the book Grindelwald kind of believes that if a witch wants to marry a Muggle, that's fine, so long as the witch is in charge, because she should be the one protecting all of humanity. So that's where this scene walked the tightrope, and there were a couple times where I thought it didn't work totally, but that's in my interpretation of the character when it works best.
Yeah, that's a subtle but like really important distinction. I think you're right. The movie is pretty unambiguously what we just talked about. Like, I think he does believe in general wizards are superior to Muggles, but he even says something like,
he does say not different, but whatever.
Not disposable, but of a different disposition. Like something like Something
Yes.
like to the effect of like their labor. and that's not as clear in the books, but you're right. I really liked not the whole finale, but the speech I thought was really well put together, especially the World War II imagery I thought was cool.
Yeah.
But I don't know. And I would hope that this will be a big part of the coming movies, the Queenie thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Number 4, why Newt? Like, why? And I think that we're going to understand more about why Dumbledore knows that it needs to be Newt to do this. Maybe he just trusts him. There's probably some kind of personal relationship there. I'm fine with that. My question is more like, why in the beginning of the movie is the Ministry of Magic interested in hiring him specifically to hunt Credence down? Like, I don't know if he has any like credentials that would make him particularly well suited to this task.
Can I offer a flippant answer? Because it's a movie about Newt. And I know that's such a dumb thing to say, but this is a thing that bothers me a lot when I watch movies, because oftentimes that's the only internal logic that these movies can achieve when you ask this question. Because this is a question I ask myself a lot. Like, why couldn't they have just had 10 guys do the thing? Or why couldn't they have done this? And a lot of times it's just like, because it's a movie about that person. And that's kind of how I feel about this. I hope they stop me from feeling this way, but to this point, I just feel like it's Newt because it's a movie about Newt,
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. My question, I guess then, more broadly, why is this a movie about Newt? Like,
yes, that's the other question.
Like,
because it was the only way for her to not seem like a money-grubbing asshole.
Yeah. And yet, but I don't think JK's an asshole, but.
No, she's not. I don't think she is at all. I don't believe that in any part of my body, but I think in the initial pitch meeting, I think to get, even for her to secure this kind of budget, she probably had to come up with some way of seeming like she wasn't just doing this to make more money.
This is my broad thing with this whole series is I want to see the movie where Newt has to go to a village and protect them from a beast that turns out ends up being super misunderstood. I want to see him flex his knowledge of magical beasts. I don't want to see it like as a throwaway little misadventure on our way to a Grindelwald movie. Like, the way that they shoehorned Beast into this movie really kind of irked me. And I think it made more sense in the first movie when it was revealed at the end, like, hey, this is going to be a prequel series. And then in this movie, it just felt like every 20 minutes they were like, well, we could probably fit in some beasts here. And it was like, what are we doing? And like, so that's like my larger question is like, why Newt? Like, why is he here? Cause I love Newt. He's like my favorite part, and I love Eddie Redmayne. I think his performance is incredible.
He's so good. I don't want to let that pass by. He is so good.
Yeah. Oh, he's really good. Was it you I was texting? Like, he gives you this, like, is he on the spectrum? Like, is he somewhere? Yeah. Like, we don't know. And he's really good, and I find him compelling. Yeah. I just wish, like, this was actually a movie about him instead of a movie about someone else through him. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like Eddie Redmayne must feel a little bit deceived. And he would, I think, be right to feel that way.
Probably. The good news is he only has to do 3 more of these, probably.
That's what we think, but he probably is contractually obligated to do as many as they want him to do.
Yeah. That's another, I guess one of my broader issues with this movie is that, like, if you remove it from the chronology, this movie's fine because the series is probably fine because it starts with who's Credence and it ends with, okay, we think we know who Credence is and Grindelwald has escaped and is starting to amass followers. Like, you don't need a movie to get between those 2 points, right? Like, I think that, I don't know if this movie was necessary at all, but yeah. That's
also, why is it 1927 and we've still got 18 years to go until the thing? Holy shit. Saddle up, dude. Saddle up. 18 years until the finale.
Right.
18. 18 years. That's almost 2 decades.
It's a long time.
That's 1% of Minerva McGonagall's life.
1%.
Jeez.
So, all right. I have a couple honorable mentions, nitpicks that were just nitpicks that I don't really want to consider unanswerable questions. When they, first of all, I don't know why Nicolas Flamel was in this movie, but
that's unanswerable. Didn't need to be, no reason.
And then on top of that, he's like, well, I'm what's the word? Not a metallurgist, but
alchemist.
An alchemist. It's like, okay, cool. That's a branch of magic we don't know a lot about. It's like, but look at this crystal ball! It's all your friends, it's them right here. That's not how crystal balls work in this universe. That was annoying. No. When, this really is just nitpicky, and I was already in a bad mood, is when Newt shows up to the freak show aftermath, like the next day, and like, puts some powder on the ground, and it like completely recreates everything that happened. What?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
I was very bothered by that. That's a different movie in a different world. Once again, I don't get super hung up on the magic all the time. That was like a different universe.
That bothered me.
It just didn't make sense. It's not the way magic works in this world.
Nope. And the last one is just, how the fuck does the French Ministry of Magic operate where Newt and Tina show up to access highly classified information and they say, I'm Theseus. This is my fiance. Please let us in. And they do? Newt is clearly not his brother, and like everyone should know what Theseus' fiance looks like. Like I'm really confused by that.
Yeah.
Do you have an explanation? And then I was like, oh, this lady knows. She's gonna let him in. She's gonna trap him. But
yes, so that's what I thought was happening.
But she doesn't let those cats in until after Lita shows up. So
I also thought that old lady was Bathilda Bagshot. She looked like the dead Bathilda Bagshot.
She did look like she was already dead. She looked like
she wasn't, which was weird.
She looked like the white-faced women from Series of Unfortunate Events, if you watch that show.
Ugh.
But
yeah,
anyways, what the? It was just like, well, this movie's getting kind of long.
Yeah, let's speed this thing along. Speaking
of which, we're at like 55 minutes. So
I know.
Number 3. Maybe you have an answer for this already, and I'm just confused. If Grindelwald, and maybe we can tie this together with number 1 a little bit. If Grindelwald knows that Dumbledore has a long-lost brother,
okay,
and he needs to find him to kill Dumbledore,
okay. Yep.
What was he doing the whole first movie when he was interacting with Credence this whole time and didn't know who he was?
Yeah. So this is this falls into my list of why does Credence need to be the thing? So I think that the idea of an Obscurus and Obscurial and all that crap is so cool. So neat. Awesome.
Love it.
Movie worthy. No question. It's an incredible, this is just such a great idea from JK. One of her finest, I actually would venture to say.
Yep.
It's such a great idea. The damage wrought by keeping who you are inside. There are so many different parallels you can make in the real world that are so true. If you know anybody who's kept a secret or tried to repress something,
yep.
It wreaks great damage. Great idea. Now, the deepening of this thing with the Blood Pact, it's called, I think, right? Blood Pact. Which is kind of a lame name, but we will go past that. But really, okay, that makes it seem like, alright, Grindelwald had to find somebody to defeat Dumbledore. Kind of makes me wonder about the logic of the Blood Pact, a la the unbreakable vow, because isn't it violating the spirit of the Blood Pact? But at any rate, it introduces the idea that he needs to bring in a third party. Why, Credence? Why do we have to go through all of this hemming and hawing and difficulty? Why is Credence the only thing that can take Dumbledore down? I get it. Dumbledore is exceptionally powerful. Why not recruit an army of 6,000 proto-Death Eaters and have them surround him and fire Avada Kedavra at him all at once? I know this is a silly situation I'm drawing, but it just makes me wonder why this whole Credence thing needs to be the driving force behind this particular plot.
I'm I'm actually fine with this concept of Dumbledore's match can only be someone of his blood. Someone like a chosen one type thing, like with Harry. Obviously it's not the same, but I'm actually okay with that. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is what I believe is just a lack of foresight in that if Grindelwald knew that he had a brother or a long lost sibling, then like, why was he so surprised to find out that it was Credence in the first movie? Like, he was actively searching for Credence's, like, an obscurial that he didn't know where it was. I was, like, I don't know, like, the whole logic of it to me is a little bit confusing. Am I just confusing myself, or is this a real thing, do you think?
So I think that this problem only truly exists if the scenario you're laying out is the case. And obviously this relates to number one, which is I don't think that this is the case, that he knows of some long lost brother. So that to me is the thing. I think my take on this, which we can tie into number one when we get there, is
I think we're of the same thinking.
I think that this is a lie. I think it's a lie. I have heard people say that they think it's Ariana Dumbledore's Obscurus. I don't remember which is which. The Obscurial, I think, is the thing, and she's the Obscurus. I don't remember. Has latched on to somebody else, and so then it's like because he does say, and I think this was interesting, I restore this name to you. Or I give you this name. Like he doesn't say you are. He kind of says I'm giving you this title. So those are really the two leading theories. It's either a lie or it's the spirit of Ariana Dumbledore latched onto something else. And if either of those things is the real thing, then this problem you're presenting isn't as much of a problem.
Okay,
it raises other problems.
Yeah. Well, I kind of liked the idea that he's just lying to a very powerful person to motivate him, because it presents down the road an opportunity for Credence to get really fucking pissed.
Yeah. It sort of pisses me off as a movie fan that I was told that I obviously wasn't told by anybody, but the movie started telling me that there was a big thing coming. Yeah. And if the big thing that was coming is a lie, this is kind of annoying. But I actually really believe it as a viewer. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm down with that. It would actually be the most logical choice for all of the characters involved.
Right. And it would explain why in the first movie, he knows there's an Obscurial in America somewhere.
Yeah.
And he needs to find it, but he doesn't have any details. Yeah, I could buy that. In fact, it seems incredibly likely. Okay, then this is not so much of a problem. But in the case that he's presenting, where he knew of a brother that Dumbledore had, it doesn't make any sense why he's looking for like a girl in.
Yes.
In
our friend Credence, you would think would be like, well, this doesn't make sense. But I don't think Credence is thinking very clearly.
That's true.
But your scenario is true. Like, even if it doesn't screw with us as viewers, it should raise some red flags in the mind of Credence, who's presumably not a dummy.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Credence should be having these kinds of questions that we're having.
Yes, as annoying as this is, like, Credence he shouldn't be that cool with this.
Credence is like, wait a minute. 3 months ago, this same guy was looking for a girl in New York and treated me like trash. But now he's telling me that I'm Dumbledore's brother.
Yeah. Yeah, Credence should be wondering some stuff.
Get woke, Credence. Yeah. All right. Number two, and we've kind of already talked about number one, so this might be our last one. Something I'm very interested to find out is we have point A, Nagini, and we have, so this woman who hangs out with Credence, and we have point C, Nagini, where her dome gets lopped off by Neville. I want at least points B through F. Like, what happens here? I'm, like, very interested to see how she ends up with our friend Tom Riddle. And I think this is probably something that will get answered pretty satisfactorily.
Yes. So this is one that I don't want to remain a mystery because, and this falls into I'm not sure JK knew what she was getting herself into when she did this, So because Nagini was cast and kind of talked about as such a big part of this movie and this series, I think it's clear she intended to answer all of this, and this wasn't purely meant as a fan servicey Minerva McGonagall-esque appearance. So I don't think this was a situation where she just kind of messed stuff up and that's it. I think she thought about this enough that she is ready to deal with the consequences. But I'm not sure she totally understood how much this was going to screw us up, where we're thinking, so Dumbledore wanted to chop off the head of a person? The issue with that is not that Dumbledore is anti-killing. He's not. He's not fully anti-killing, and he's definitely not anti-killing Horcruxes. Like, he's cool with that. But he's also big into offering people choice.
Yeah.
Because I know he's not the person who tells Harry, I believe it's Hermione, that remorse is the only way to undo a Horcrux. But I think he would have, if he had seen it, he'd have been very proud of Harry for, in the books, telling Tom to repent. And probably would be less cool with killing a person who is under a werewolf-like curse without offering them a chance to be retransformed or cured or something. So that's my thing, is I think that because JK opened up that line of issue, she's gonna have to really answer the crap out of this.
Yeah, I think there are two likely scenarios. One is that Dumbledore doesn't know, which is possible.
And in our conversation about the fuzziness of actual life would actually be pretty reasonable. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine if they show this story and it's never, like, Dumbledore is not omniscient. If he doesn't know this, that's fine.
The second one that I hope ends up being the case is that Dumbledore does know, but in his mind, there's something that he witnesses down the road that we hopefully get to witness where she's made a very clear choice and has had her chance. Like, hopefully this isn't a thing where she turns into a snake and then Riddle is like, hey, a snake! And they just happen. Like, I would think that probably at some point she casts her lot with, but I don't know, like, but by the time that,
although,
it feels like, I don't know, it feels like the timelines don't line up, but
they don't really line up because in the books, he says he met a snake in the forests. And as my recollection is, we're led to believe he just met a snake and befriended it.
Right.
During his banishment in the forests. Isn't that sort of how we were supposed to interpret that, I believe.
That's kind of how I was operating this whole time.
At least in my recollection, this was spelled out clearly enough that some scenario where they'd start doing dark deeds together long before that is hard to envision. I guess there could be a scenario in which a young Tom Riddle and a medium-aged Nagini have some misadventures while she's in human form. He doesn't know she's a, whatever this is called, maledictus, I think.
Yeah.
And then just sees her in the forest and is like, oh, there's something about the spirit of this creature that calls to me. Like, that's actually, I'd be kind of okay with that scenario. That's like a reasonable explanation for how that works.
I would be somewhat into a scenario where, because she would have to be really old by the time that they interacted. I would be into some scenario where she became some kind of mother figure to him because he never had anyone like that. And then she turned into a snake and then he kept her around. Do I think that's what's going to happen here? I'm kind of the thinking that this was just, I don't know, I hope not. It feels like, well, now you know something about Nagini before she was a snake and it's not entirely clear why she is now like hanging out.
That's kind of what I think. Cause I really, maybe I'm clinging to a false recollection, but I think we got it, like from the horse's mouth. Like, I think Voldemort told us this. Quinn will correct me, but I think he tells us, like, I met her in the forests, and I don't really see what his motivation would be to lie, except for the fact that J.K. Rowling hadn't thought of the idea of a maledictus yet, and just came up with this after.
Yeah. So that's an unanswered question, and we'll see how that works out.
And it will be answered.
Yeah. Number 1 was the Aurelius thing, and I think we kind of talked about it.
Yeah.
We'll see. I'm with you. I think that Grindelwald is lying to him, and I think it makes for kind of a nice redemption arc for Credence.
Yeah. Yeah, because we kind of need him to come back. Like, we like him enough. I don't know why we like him, because he's kind of a twerp, but...
I don't really, but I think that it's important that he is redeemed, because that's like kind of the spirit of these novels, right? Like, this kid was abused and forced to repress himself, and it's kind of a bummer of a story if eventually he... Like, I was bummed at the beginning of the first one when it looked for a minute that he was just dead because he was misunderstood by all these people. I mean, I guess it happened to Ariana, but it would be nice to have some kind of redemptive arc for him, and I think almost necessary, so...
Agreed. And I have no real additions. I don't think it makes a ton of sense to reorder this. This is a little bit more of a breakdown, so I think I'm very happy with the list as you've put it together.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we got to dissect this. After talking through this, my opinion has not changed. I didn't like this movie very much, but there were parts of it that I enjoyed.
Can I give you my thoughts on... I want to give you a homework assignment, and my homework assignment to you is to do the exact opposite of my viewing, which was, my viewing was love the crap out of the good parts and then watch it and see how they don't work. Instead, you had that, like, I fully got taken out of the moment experience right away. Now go back and watch it and focus on the really good moments. Think about why they don't hang together, but just focus on some of those good moments and just say, I want to appreciate the stuff that was good about this.
All right, I'll try it. And I will say, like, there were parts of it that were so cool. Like, I was cracking up that whole, his relationship with that big, like, Chinese cat creature thing.
Oh, that was great.
Love that.
Little cat toy. I also loved the don't say salamander thing, was incredible.
Funny. I really liked the Kelpie scene. There were parts of it that, and like visually it was incredible. Like, these movies always are, but
it looked a lot better than the first one too, I thought. I liked the look of this a lot better.
Yeah. It was just a movie that ultimately I think was just too caught up and too crowded and too confused and just too much. And I think it wasn't able for me to escape some of my pre-existing uneasiness about what this series is from like a meta perspective. But so whatever, I'm still looking forward to the next one. So,
yep. Amen.
All right, let's wrap this very long podcast up. Would you like to send the people out? Or should I recap first?
Yeah. Are we going to recap, or you want to just talk about stuff?
Yeah, I'll recap it real quick. Okay. Top 10 unanswered questions in Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. Number 10, why was Newt expelled from Hogwarts? Anyways, how did that work out? Number 9, who was Lita talking to at the end when she confessed that she did love them before she was killed for some reason? Number 8.
Also, why did that happen?
Yeah, what the fuck? Number 8, how do Confundus charms in this universe work again? Or was that just kind of a slip? Number 7, is Yusuf still under an unbreakable vow after failing to kill Credence? Do we care? No. Number 6, how old is Professor McGonagall again? Not quite clear. Number 5, was Queenie imperious or not? That's a big one.
Let's hope not.
Yeah, I hope not. Number 4, why Newt? Why Newt? Number 3, why didn't Grindelwald know to look for Credence in Fantastic Beasts and where to find them? Number 2, what is Nagini's thing? Number 1, who is Aurelius Dumbledore?
Yeah.
We will find out. All right.
Yes, we sure will.
That is that. And now, Mike, would you like to send the people out?
Yeah, so instead of doing our little pre-recorded funky music time, we wanted to send you off with a little reminder of how you can talk to us. So as Kyle and I like to remind you, we are on several different channels, all the major social channels. So we've got Facebook, we've got an Instagram, not yet, but we do have somebody who may be helping us with an Instagram. Stay tuned, people.
Oh,
we have a Twitter, a little teaser.
Oh.
Well, I can't make any career announcements on this pod. But somebody who may have a little extra free time on her hands, maybe will help us with Instagram. We have a Twitter at top10km. Along with our dear friend Kyle, we'll be pumping up our Twitter presence going forward. We've not done a great job with it to this point, but we will be doing more Twittering. So please check us out on Twitter.
I'd like to add to that. We have an active, not a Twitter poll, but we have an active Twitter request. We're still taking submissions for best musical album of 2018. We've gotten some great responses so far on that.
We have, and we will be following up, so your work will not go unrewarded. And please check us out wherever you listen to podcasts. We are on Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcast app. I think we're on Spotify.
We're on Spotify. We're on Google Play.
Yeah, we're on Google Play. Yep. All those major things.
And then I'd just like to wrap up by saying that our theme music was composed by Kevin MacLeod, and our artwork was designed by Erin Sand. And she, unlike us, is on Instagram. She got all sorts of cool stuff you can take a look at. I think that's it, Mike. So I think we'll probably do this again next week.
I think we will.
All right. See you later, buddy.
Bye.
Peace.